Life is full of obstacles that will demotivate you. Things that once were really exciting to you suddenly feel like an extreme task that you have to accomplish. Other things get you really excited to get out of bed, and other things completely drain you and you don't want to roll over and start the day. We're going to talk today about what happens when you lose your motivation and some strategies that will help you get your motivation back to go after it. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you are probably in the real estate field. You're either an investor, a realtor, broker, anyone. Maybe you're just an entrepreneur, and sometimes life happens. We all start our investment or our entrepreneurial journey with some big reason as to why we're doing it. We want to be our own boss. We want financial freedom. We want the ability to choose. But then as life happens, there are things that completely go after our motivation, such as a realtor, maybe that deal fell apart. Maybe a client fired you. Maybe someone doesn't want to buy what you're selling.
Somebody don't want what you're selling.
Little Glen Ross reference there. It can be highly demotivating. I have been dealing with agents all the time who come to me and said, you know what? I just found out that a client I was working for just worked with another agent. I am devastated. And while it sucks, we can't let ourselves stay down too long. We have to find ways to remotivate ourselves because at the end of the day, we got into the business we got into for a reason. And in today's podcast, this is Manning Up After Dark on the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast, we are going to talk about 3 strategies to help you get your motivation back because nothing's worse than starting something and not accomplishing it. That actually drains your motivation even more. So let's start with the first one. And you've probably heard the term having a big why before. It's a very common thing that most business entrepreneurs teach, most business gurus, people talk about it all. Well, you have to have a big why. Then with that big why, you've got vision boarding, you've got goal setting, you've got everything else like that. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that doesn't always work to keep you motivated. You see, sometimes people set their big why almost too big, and that's not a bad thing, but they set it almost too big where they don't feel like they can actually achieve that. And nothing's worse than setting a goal and then feeling like a failure that you didn't achieve it. So I'm going to switch it around on you guys. Not only do I think you should have a big why, you should have a reason why you're doing this. Is it for financial freedom? Is it to spend more time with your children? Is it to give back to the community? Whatever your big why is. Also, think about your wall. Well, Cameron, what is the wall? Well, let me tell you. Ryan Serhant in his course, Sell It Like Serhant, talks about the big wall. And this was a very profound moment for me. And it has me thinking all the time because at the end of the day, people either make decisions based on moving towards pleasure or away from pain. So, are you a pleasure motivated person or an avoidance of pain motivated person? Here's how the wall works. What's that one situation in your life that you never want to go through, feel that way you felt, or experience again in your life? I'm going to give you an example of a personal story. Now, I made some mistakes early on in my career. I was not financially smart. I made a lot of terrible mistakes. And one of those mistakes led me, after a breakup, to be completely honest, borderline homeless. After I made a breakup, I was not financially sound, did not have a lot of money in my bank. I made some financial mistakes. And luckily, my mentor, Kelly, had a vacant unit all the way out in Abbotsford that she was renovating. Now, luckily, I had an air mattress and some other stuff that I was able to pull with me. So I moved into that condo for about 5 or 6 days while I looked for a new place to live. In the meantime, she was renovating. The place did not have a proper shower head. So I was having to bath with just the tap in the bathtub. The handle was broken on the toilet, so I'd have to lift the lid to pull the plunger every time to flush the toilet. And again, they were renovating. So every time I would get home from the office after a long drive back to Abbotsford, I would get there and my air mattress would be full of drywall dust and everything, so I'd have to knock that all off before I go to bed. That was miserable, but that wasn't even the worst of it because after I found a place to live, it was in a basement room. Now, luckily, it had its own entrance of somebody's house in Pitt Meadows. I moved in there. They provided furniture. They provided a fridge. That was really nice. The rent was really affordable for me at the time because, again, I didn't have much money in the bank and I was just getting started in my career. And guess what? The very first night I woke up, I was covered in fucking ants. You heard that right. Like literally, I woke up and in my covers and all over me were ants. The place had an ant infestation. When I asked the owners about it, they said, "Oh, yeah, we've known that's been a problem for a while." So for the next several nights, my job was literally come home and find ways to kill these ants. Now, luckily, I took care of it, but that is a feeling that I never want to experience again in my life. So not only do I have my vision, my big why as to what I'm working towards, but I also have my wall, what I never want to have to experience again in my life. And that's why I'm so motivated and I work so hard to be able to achieve what I'm going to achieve. The second thing comes from another book called The One Thing. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you may have heard me mention it before. The One Thing is a book by Gary Keller. He wrote this book as a business book that transcends all industries. It is a motivation based book, and it really centers around one question. What is the one thing that by doing so renders everything else either easier or unnecessary? Now, in this book, he goes on to several other what myths that we experience, what other things that we can do from a strategy perspective to keep our mindset strong, but it all revolves back around this one question. What is that one thing that by doing so will either render everything else easier or completely unnecessary? So when we're thinking about our task list, things that we need to check off and get done for the day, what is that one thing that we should tackle first? What is the hardest thing on that list? You see, one of the concepts in the book is that willpower is on will call. And throughout the day, there are going to be so many things flying at you that's going to chip away at your willpower. So if you're going after the easiest tasks first, by the end of the day, your willpower is drained and you don't want to do those hard tasks. So pick the task that's the hardest and get it done right out of the gate. Another concept that I've heard this called also is eat the frog for breakfast. You go after the hardest things to start your day, and that will make the rest of your day easier. Your motivation will stay at a much higher level because everything else will be easy to accomplish. So think about that next time you're creating your to-do list or your task list or to get done list. What is the one thing that by doing so will render everything else easier or completely unnecessary? And then the last one is not so much about finding motivation again, but once we have found it, how do we keep it? How do we keep ourselves motivated to consistently do the tasks day after day after day that we know we need to do? Might be boring as hell, but we know we need to do it in order to achieve that big why that we set at the very beginning. And to do that, we have to build a bulletproof mindset. This is honestly one of the most important things we're going to talk about today is creating that strong mindset. Because no matter what, if you have a strong mindset, even if you lose motivation temporarily, that strong mindset mixed with the other two things we just talked about will help you get back into your motivation, help you get back into production right away. So let's talk about it. There's going to be 8 points. Now, in this case, I'm going to ask you to write these down. Now, if you're driving, listening to this podcast, re-listen to it when you get home. Make sure you write these down because these 8 parts to building a bulletproof mindset are as follows. Number 1, stop watching the news. That's right. And you know what? In fact, let's add that. Stop going into some of those negative Facebook threads. You know, there are some really annoying threads out there where all it is constant people piling on negative, 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 negative. You don't need that in your life. Obviously, depending on the industry you're in, you're going to need to know what's happening in the news, but you don't have to watch it all. You don't have to watch about this drug bust or this bad thing happening in the world or whatever, because all of that takes away your positive mindset. So really filter what you're putting in your mind. Stop watching the news. Leave some of those Facebook groups. Only go into the groups that spread positivity. Number 2, start listening to more podcasts. If you're listening to this one, obviously, thank you so much. But I encourage you to have a whole bunch of podcasts that feed your brain every single day. A good example of what you can do here is pick 5 podcasts that you're going to listen to. Have a Monday podcast, a Tuesday podcast, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And every single day, listen to an episode, especially if they're like a weekly drop. That makes it even easier. You're just keeping up to date with the weekly one. Couple that I would recommend if you're in the real estate world, obviously, subscribe to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. Thank you so much, guys. Throw me on your listening to do. However, there's some other great ones, such as if you're a realtor, I really recommend the Live on Real podcast. Live on Real is a fantastic one with some great information to help you guys grow your business. Another one I would encourage is the Millionaire Real Estate Investor podcast. And if you're investors, there's a lot of great podcasts for investors out there as well. And honestly, there's great business ones. There's so many, and not all of them are long. Some of them are great bite-sized podcasts that are 5 minutes. You listen to it, you get a dose of energy, you get a dose of positivity, and you move on with your day. Pick 5 podcasts that you're going to listen to on a daily basis, plan them out, and it's easy. Put it on when you're doing your commute to work. maybe finish it on your commute back to work. If you're a realtor and you're doing showings, listen to podcasts while you're showing. Feed your mind with positive information. Number 3, and this one's going to be a little bit of a difficult one, but stop hanging around with negative people. It goes back to that law where you're the sum of the 5 people, or the average of the 5 people you hang around the most with. So if you're hanging around with nonstop negative people, all they do is want to go talk about what went wrong in their day. Their boss did this. They don't like what's on the news here, blah, blah, blah. You're just going to become the 5th negative person. Start really looking at who you're spending the most amount of time with and start cutting out some of those people. And again, this one's a hard one for a lot of people because they have built their entire life around hanging around certain people. And it's really going to be a hard conversation to have, that you have to break ties with those people because they're not helping your mental energy. They're not helping you get to where you need to get to. So stop hanging around negative people. Surround yourself in rooms with positive people. Number 4, if you're in business, I highly recommend you get to conferences. Go out to find people who are positive. When you're hanging out with people who are like-minded, all trying to learn and grow and thrive in this world, that's only going to impact you on the positive. Find conferences where you can go to, where people are trying to achieve exactly what you are achieving, or they are achieving what you are aiming to achieve. That's one of the best things you can do. Now, don't go be a seminar junkie or a conference junkie and hit 10, 20 every single year, but get out to about 4 to 5 conferences every single year in the space in which you're in, and go meet more positive people. Build your tribe, build your circle, and go and educate yourself. Number 5, don't be attached to outcomes. Not everything is going to work out the way you want it to. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Sometimes things happen. A client doesn't want to buy with you and they bought with another realtor. An investor that was going to invest with you suddenly is pulling out. It can be catastrophic in our mind. I can completely understand. You go, why? What happened? Why would this person not want to work with me? Why did this person not want to invest? Why did that deal fall apart? What could I have done better? There's so many things that will start going through our mind, but if you're attached to those outcomes, it doesn't let you move on easily. This is something that I've really started to master a lot in my life. In fact, people in my office always go, well, aren't you upset because that deal fell apart? I go, yeah, is what it is. We'll move on. We'll find something else, or we'll go find another client or what have you. They always get almost annoyed with me that I'm just so detached from the final outcome, because I'm not looking at that one incidence. I'm looking at the long term. I'm looking at what I need to do consistently. One thing I will say, and this goes for if you're any sort of business, when you generate, you don't have to tolerate. When you have enough people and enough leads coming in for your business and enough people buying what you're selling, you don't have to tolerate that much. When things don't go through, you're able to mentally just move on and go towards the next task that you have to go to. So work on it, get better at being detached from outcomes. Number 6 is to read 1 or 2 pages out of a self-help book every single day. This is a super simple one. I'm not sitting there saying you need to read like an hour a day, but pick up a self-help book and just read a couple of pages just to get your mind in a positive frame. There are hundreds, if not thousands of self-help books, and I already gave you one today, The One Thing. Also big fan of Sell It Like Sirhan, obviously from the first part. Go out there and pick up a self-help book and just read a couple of pages every day, maybe 3 or 4 if you really like reading. Go out, put some positive stuff in your brain. Number 7 is to join or even create your own mastermind. Again, this goes back to surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, growth-minded, who are going to support each other, give each other ideas. This is one of the foundations of a lot of the success I have had in my career over the last decade. And that's because since the very beginning as an investor, I started going to different groups. One of the ones that I was a part of early on in my days was called Investor Edge. It was a group of Rich Dad students that got together at a Denny's at least once a month. We would grab dinner, hang out, and we'd talk about what we're working on. We'd share ideas, share contacts, help each other out. So what kind of mastermind can you join to be able to help you surround yourself with the people who have the positive mindset, who help you build that bulletproof mindset and will push you forward? Now, I'm going to give you 2 examples if you're in the Lower Mainland or Fraser Valley. One, if you're an investor, of course, you might have heard me mention it before in previous episodes. If you're a regular listener, we have the Investors Performance Group. This is a monthly meetup that we do every single month to bring as much value as we can and networking opportunities for investors in and around the Lower Mainland. And of course, we do live stream it, so you can watch it live stream on my other channel, youtube.com/Cameron Manning. So go over there, subscribe. You can actually check out all of our past episodes there. Now, if you're in the realtor side of things, we are actually launching a mastermind. What we're looking to do is just gather a group of realtors who are going to network and mastermind, share ideas, and help each other grow on a regular basis. We're aiming to do this quarterly, but we're trying our first one. So we're listening to exactly what we're talking about here, and we're creating our own mastermind. If you're not in an area that has masterminds that you can join, think about creating your own. And the last one on the bulletproof mindset is just go out, break a sweat, and get some fresh air to start your day. There's nothing better than going out, getting your heart moving, your heart pumping, breathing in some fresh air, even if it's a little bit cool, because we live in Canada. Breathe in some fresh air and start your day. You cannot have a bad day if you started it the right way. If you own the morning, you will win the day. All of these concepts, all 8 of these, we got from Glover U, Live Unreal in the past. They are really focused around everything they teach with starting with a strong mindset, and you should also be focused on that as well. So use the concepts we talked about in today's episode to really bump your motivation back up. Start with what's your big why, but also what's your wall. Ask yourself constantly, what's the one thing that you can do that will render everything else easier or unnecessary? And lastly, focus on building that bulletproof mindset. If you do all of these tasks, when you lose motivation, it will be really easy for you to get it back. And that's the key. And I'm not saying you won't lose motivation. Every once in a while, things do happen to us that will derail us. But the key is how quickly you get back into motivation and get back onto your goals. Thanks for listening. This is another episode of Manning Up After Dark. If you've enjoyed this, make sure you rate the podcast, give me a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.